let's get started. So if you go to insomnia.rest, just like you can see on my screen, you can have access to Insomnia Core and Insomnia Designer. So for this Tech Bytes, we're going to be looking at Insomnia Core. So the desktop API client for REST and GraphQL, make request, inspect responses. So we'll be working with the REST part because that is what I'm more familiar with, but GraphQL is another type. And you can explore that more on your own by researching free open source GraphQL APIs. Awesome. So here we have Insomnia design and debug APIs like a human, not a robot. So if we scroll down, it gives you kind of a few pointers about what it is. It creates requests, you can review requests, you can organize everything, design API. Oh no, that's the other one. And then it shows how many people are using it, some stuff that you can get, and then a link. So if you want to follow along today, you can go ahead and download it. If not, you can do so at another time. It comes with, it has a Mac, a Windows, and a Linux version. So whatever operating system you're using, you don't have to worry about it. You can get it. Awesome. So when you open up Insomnia, their core application, because they just came out with the designer one, it's gonna look similar to this, but you're not gonna have any of these requests in the sidebar because you haven't created any yet. So I've created two, and I have a Mapbox API one, a Twitter API one, Bike hacks. I'm just gonna mute my mic for a sec. Sorry about that. Lots of people riding their bicycles. So I have a bike hacks one that was this weekend. He had I can show this one because it doesn't have any secrets. Basically what he did was just a little challenge, and you had to find the one that had the secret code. Obviously password equals 30 wasn't the one. Nope. So right here we have the elephant API, and then we have the dog API. So before we get started, let's look at the documentation because that's always a good point to start. So right here it says the elephant API, a free API to feature awesome elephants in your next project. That sounds so cool. Awesome. So it goes, finally, for the longest of time, we lived in an unjust world where cats and dogs had their respective APIs. Elephants did not. Not anymore. So it kind of gives you a rundown on how to use it, right? So it goes, these are real elephants. If you don't believe me, check them out on Wikipedia. As such, they come with interesting data points to use as placeholders in your next app. These include names, date of birth, or death, sex, species, or even some important facts about their lives. So it goes, most basic request is list all the elephants, which is https elephant-api.herokuapp.com/elephants. So the /elephants is an endpoint, and it lists all the elephants. Now it goes another one where it's the random elephants. So it goes elephants/random. So the random is another endpoint. And then by sex, you can just go /sex/male or female, I'm assuming. And then there's names. If you know their name, you can go elephant/name/Bob. And then by species, if you really know elephant species, you can go /species/an elephant species. And then it just goes on, why would you use it? And if you like it, you can go and visit these links. So awesome. So let's copy this first request here. Go back to our app, and I'm going to show you how to make a request. I already have a request here, but we can go ahead and delete it. So if you didn't see that, I clicked the little triangle. You can go delete, confirm. Awesome. So to create a new request in the sidebar, or you can see here Command N, but we can do this with our mouse. So we click here, we go New Request. But before we do that, let's create a folder for all our elephants APIs. Let's call this Elephant API. I'm going to create it. So now we have this folder. It says click here to add your first response. So my first response is going to be all elephants, and it's going to be a GET request. So we're going to get all this information. We're not writing to the API, we're not modifying it, we're not adding, we're not deleting, we're just getting information. So we're going to hit create, and there we go. We get our GET request. We can also change this at any point to any of the other types. And then it shows us API my products. So we're going to paste in the elephants. And so there's kind of different things, but for this API, we don't need a body, we don't need authorization, we don't need queries or headers or anything of the sorts. So we don't have to worry about that. But what we do know is that to send the request, we can hit enter or we can hit send. So let's do send. And just like as expected, we have a list of all the elephants, which is pretty cool. So this just allows us to have a visual representation of what the API gets us before we go and work on it in JavaScript or in Python. So we're not fiddling around with console.logs and trying to make sure like, oh, where does, like, how do I get the date of birth? Is it date of birth? Is it DOB? Is it DOD? So here we already know what's expected and what's coming from the request. So here we have ID, we have index, we have name, we have affiliation, species, sex, fictional, date of birth, wiki link, all this stuff. So we already know how to get this stuff. So when we get the elephants, we get this huge data in JSON format. And so what we would have to do is we'd be like data.0.id. And that would help us get what we want much quicker than if we were just going in blind. Because as we could see on the documentation, it didn't give us an example of what it would return. So this way we know what it returns and we can easily go and put that into practice without having to worry too much. So let's try to get a random elephant. So let's copy and paste this, go back to our Insomnia client, and we're gonna click this arrow, we're gonna go new request. So random elephant. And it's always a GET request still. So let's put it in. And again, we don't need to give it anything, so we can just hit send. And this is just giving us a random elephant. So if we hit send again, it's going to be echo. And now it's Batar. So it's always giving us a random one. But it followed the same format as all elephants, right? So it has ID, index, name, affiliation, species, sex, fictional, date of birth, date of death, wiki link, image, and notes. Awesome. So what other ones did they have again? So they had by sex, right? So if we go ahead and copy this and we create a new request, sort by and if you ever want to rename it, you can just go settings and you can do a bunch of different things as well. You can copy it to a workspace, you can add global settings, lots of different things. So where it says the brackets sex, we can change that to male. And there we go. That gives us all the elephants that are male. And if we changed it to female, it updated with the correct response. let's do the name one, and then I think we'll be done with the elephants API. So let's create a new request. Go sort by name. And then here with name, we don't actually know any of their names, right? So let's hit send, and it gives us 404 not found. So we have to give it a name. So let's go back to our all elephants request. And let's do this one, Balarama. So you put that there, we send, and it gave us what we expected. Now what happens if we made it a lowercase? I don't think it matters. No. So that's awesome. So now we have a visual of each of the API endpoints for the elephant API. So let's do the same with the dog API. So again, if you want to follow along, here are the resources in chat. So this one, as you can see, is vastly different than the elephant API that we were just working with. It shows you how to get to the endpoint, and then it also shows us the JSON. So it already shows us a visual of what we're going to get, which helps us when we are writing our own code, but it's always nice to know for sure. So let's take this one, and let's see if it gives us what it shows there. So we're gonna create a new folder, dog API, and we're gonna make a new request. So all breeds. I'm gonna create it. So let's see if it actually gives us what we want. And it does. It looks very similar to what it shows. Awesome. So we have a couple of endpoints here, list all breeds. That's what we just did. We have a random image. Let's see it. So we're gonna go. It should look similar to message and status and with an image. So let's see if that's true. So new request, random image, paste it in here, make sure we got it correct. So let's send it off. And it actually shows what we wanted, which is a message which has the link to an image. If we go and copy and paste this into the browser, it's a random image of a dog. Awesome, so that's working. And you can kind of see stuff like this. I don't know if I should have showed you that. You can have cookies and timelines. You can also go and look at your request history. You can delete current response. You can clear the history. So lots of things that you can do with the Insomnia client. And it just makes it a lot easier to visualize, especially if you're a visual person. It's a great way to get to know the ins and out of an API client or an API. And it just allows you to better focus on writing code instead of debugging when you're trying to work with a new API. So this is very helpful if you're new to the job or if you're working with an API that you've never worked with before. Lots of different reasons too. So just looking at these two APIs that we worked with today, you can tell that the dog API was much better written in terms of documentation where it showed you what you should expect as a response, so you don't have to go digging yourself. Whereas the Elephant API just gave you endpoints and kind of said, do whatever you want to do. So that's why we use tools like this, is because sometimes the documentation is not there and it's easier to get to know what you're doing right away rather than trying to fiddle with debugging and printing and putting things in the console. Awesome. So that's gonna end today's Tech Bites. As always, if you want more information, you can go to hightechu.ca. You can also follow us or subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can see past Tech Bite episodes. You can also see them here on Twitch. If you follow us, you can get notifications whenever we go live. We're going to have another Tech Bites this Wednesday with Mateo and Tinkercad. So this is the one that's prepping students for the ECE cohort that HighTechU is running. So all the links are in the chat on Twitch. Thank you again for joining. Hopefully you got a little bit out of it. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them, and I will get to answer them. If not, that'll be the end of today's Tech Bites, and thank you very much.